Hello and welcome to Colin Bradley Artcast. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
How you doing, Dad?
I'm doing well, Steve. Thank you.
Good. We're back to video podcasts this week, back to seeing each other on the screen. But it was nice to sit next to you for a change and record a podcast.
It was, well, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's better if you can do that. But we appreciate that. I mean, social media would fall down, wouldn't it? If that had to happen now, just wouldn't be possible. Everybody's on it now, and I think that it works out really well. But no, I'm delighted that we can do this for people.
Same, same. Have you had a good week? What have you been up to? We saw you obviously last week.
That's right. Well, yes, we have had a good week. I've started another picture, which I should have by next week, all being well. And this time it's a cat. So that'll please people, especially the cat lovers. And it's a nice one. Different, though. Once again, different. I'm looking for different things now, different things that challenge me, and obviously in turn challenge our members as well.
Excellent, lovely stuff. So we've got a few things to talk about this week. We'll start with an update on what we were talking about last week. If people remember, we had mentioned Geoff's portrait, and you gave some advice on the podcast about what Geoff could do about a background and mentioned the hairline. Well, Geoff has taken your advice on board and has sent us another picture. So I'll pop that up on screen alongside the one that he sent us last week, and you can just see how well Geoff's done in taking your advice on board and then implementing what you said. And what a difference.
It's amazing what a difference that does make. And sometimes people sort of think, "Oh, are you splitting hairs, Colin?" Not really. With portrait work, there's so many things that you need to remember and think about. Most importantly, really, is the portrait, unless it's an obscure person, like some of the pictures I've done, if you're doing it of somebody, you've got to be pretty accurate, really, with the details. And one of the things that Geoff did do really well was the hairline. As you remember, I did mention it looked a bit like a wig on the picture that he'd done, the original picture. And all we had to do, and he realised how simple it really was, to just do a little bit of blending in that area. And it came up beautifully. But I'm particularly impressed with the bottom of the picture, where it's so easy to cut it off, and you think, well, what can I do if I've got to cut it off unless I put the whole of the dress or the coat or whatever the person's wearing in? Well, you don't have to do that. And right from the word go, I was doing a portrait many years ago, one of the first ones I ever did. I developed that, and I'd seen it, and I can't remember where I'd seen it. Must have been in a portrait gallery somewhere, I think. I saw it, and I thought, oh, I like the idea of that. And consequently, I did it for my animals, and then I did it for portrait work, where you don't have a cut off. It looks as though you just chopped somebody's head off and shoulders off. But he did really well there. And to fade that in again, it's such a simple thing to do. It only works, though, if you've got a background on it. If you haven't got a background, it's more difficult because you've got nothing to blend into. So it forces you, in a way, to put a background on. But the background is put on is great. Mid-grade.
I agree that's that simple background that just lifts and elevates the whole picture, as you say, enables you to have something to blend into as well. What a difference.
I think in future, what Geoff will do, now he's done that, he will experiment a little bit on the background, because it's nice just to have variations. You know, all my backgrounds, almost without a question, have got some variation in it. A little bit of dark, a little bit of light, a little bit of colour. You've got to be careful of that, and it's best to do softly job, you know, don't do too
Build
much.
your confidence as well. Build your
That's
confidence
right.
doing that.
But the most important thing is doing a background like that, where you have then the facility to blend in where necessary.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Well done, Geoff. Fantastic work. So let's move on to YouTube. And we had a question that came in on our last podcast from Merv. And he said, "Hi, Colin. I see you use Pastel Mat a lot now. Have you ever used Canson Meton? And if so, what are your thoughts on the paper?" So for a time, we sold the Canson Meton Touch, which is a slightly different paper. And you did do, I can't remember now which picture it was. I don't know if it was a dog or something. You did an animal. Might have been a cat. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you did do a couple of pictures on the Meton touch paper, which is different. Give us your thoughts, Dad, on that paper anyway.
Well, yes, I must have been quite pleased with that because I must have experimented before I took the plunge, and it must have worked for me. The reason I don't do it is I don't need to. When Pastomat came along, it knocked all others out of the way. I mean, UArt, I've used that, but it doesn't have the same feel as Pastelmat. But I don't like the Meton dimpled paper. You know that I don't like that, and I've seen people use it, and again, I think it spoils the pictures in a way. I know not everybody agrees with me, and that's fine. But the actual dimpled paper, and you said, when we were talking before, you can use the reverse side. You can. And you can do the same with ombre as well. If people that don't like the ombre texture can turn it over, and it's not quite so apparent on the reverse side. I don't think when I was using it, it worked as well on the reverse side. That's only me, though. Again, everybody's got their own idea. So the answer is yes, the smooth. Canson smooth is quite nice, but Canson dimpled paper, I can't remember what that's called.
I don't know if it's just the Meton paper is the dimple one, and the Meton
yes.
touch is a slightly
Meton,
different textured. It's slightly more appealing. I suppose you mentioned this I was editing one of your projects recently, and you described the texture of the pastel mat because it's like sandpaper. It pulls the pastel off of the pencil. You almost like, it's that friction of it just pulling away the pastel and gripping it, holding onto it. Obviously, that surface is kind of the premium surface for pastel pencil work, and I imagine other textured papers, they don't have quite the same pull, they don't have quite the same effect because it just seems like a perfect combo. The pastel and mat and the pastel pencil just seem to just to go so well together. But I suppose all of these papers have their own places in pastel work. Some might be better for soft pastel and things like that. They and everyone has their own sort of preferences when it comes to those tooths and papers. And as we've mentioned before, the ombre is a great starter paper too. Gets people into it. And I suppose, would you say, because the pastel mat is that sandpaper texture, it's quite an aggressive paper in terms of how much pastel it takes off. You need a lot of pastel for it. It's if you're not used to pastel pencil work, I imagine that is quite aggressive in terms of the application of it, and thinking, God, that's sandpaper. When we think of sandpaper anyway, we think of that as quite coarse anyway. So it's not quite so nice on the fingers either.
No, absolutely not. Well, I think every person, every artist has got their own technique. Pastel mat seems to fit my technique really well, and that's why I like it so much. But one of the benefits you didn't mention is that you can put light over dark easier than you can with the ombre paper. It's just that you've got a better grip, and I think if I had to go back to ombre, I'd struggle a little bit now because I'm so used to being able to put the light hairs across the background and across the subject that I would struggle a bit. So, no, I think, but interesting enough though, I thought the cat that I'm doing at the moment, and you'll see it all being well next week. I'm using light grey pastel matte paper. It seemed to suit the particular picture that I was doing. I looked at it and thought, is it sand? Yeah, that will work. But so I used the light grey pastel matte. I've used it before, and I'm pleased with it, except it's harder when you've got to do a background. Interesting enough, I've got a background which is a very light grey, and I put some darker grey, or the 233, people know that, into it. And I had to do it 3 times to get the smoothness, actually, to put it in.
That's a lot
So,
of battle.
well, I don't know why that is. I don't know whether other people have found the same. But it's the first time I've actually come across that. It may be that because I've done different sections of this, and the last section I did was easier because I knew what was coming. But people will see me do it. They'll see me actually struggle to get the smoothness. But in the end, you do get it because pastel matte will take it. So you can take it, but I think you need more of the base colour. And I can see that if people were using that and didn't have my experience or didn't know how you could get out of something, you'd have a problem with that. You'd have it marking. You think, oh my goodness, I've ruined this. So, but you haven't, because you can then put more of the lighter colours in. So that's going to be very interesting for people to see that, and it's interesting for me to know it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect particularly the subject, the animal. I've gone as far as that. Although I was aware that I had to work the background, not the background, the base colours. I had to work those a little more, but I intended to anyway. But it wasn't until I got to this section of background I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't say that, but I thought it. Oh my goodness, because I was filming it. What do you do?
Yeah.
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 So I have to get out of it, and I did, fortunately, and it looks good.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll bring it back to the picture you did before this this cat that you're going to show us next week, and we'll talk about that now. So I'll pop that on screen for everyone to see. And this is again something very different. I've not seen you do something like this before, in a shadow form as well. Very atmospheric. I'm curious, before we start, what size is this picture?
Well, it's normal size. It's just larger than A5.
Right. Wow, that seems quite small. Like, it looks big. Looks like it's a fairly big picture. You've
It does,
captured a
doesn't
lot
it?
of
No,
detail.
it's not. No, it's not. It's a bit bigger than A5. Somewhere between the A5 and the A4, but more to the A5. The reason I do that is simple. It's the when you're filming it, it's easier to have it contained and not spread. If it's spread too far, too wide, I've got to pull back the camera and all sorts of problems. So that's the reason I do it. But I must admit, though, when I did the line drawing of this, I increased it slightly. So people, when they get the line drawing, it will be slightly bigger than the actual picture. Not much,
Gotcha.
just a little bit. It just makes it easy. And people can have it any size they want, really. The computer system now we have, you can enlarge to whatever size you want. I wouldn't go too big, though. So anyway,
So this is again another one with there's fabric, material, clothing, and you've got some folds in there. You've got hands again that look quite tricky to do. There's light. It's a lot of the same aspects of the one that you did previously in colour transfer to this, but obviously with just 4 colours. Tell me about what your experience was like creating those same effects with just 4 colours.
this was challenging for me. Mainly the hands. You pointed out the hands. They were really hard, and people will find them hard. And the reason they were hard is you see, she's got a hand reaching up towards the light. Well, that was my take on it. It wasn't on the original, but that's what I assume she was wanted to do. Well, that hand was reaching the light, and she had it. I don't know how she did it, but it twisted somehow. I can't emulate it now, but it was twisted in such a way I couldn't work out where the fingers were. I thought, what? And I blew it up as well, but I still couldn't work it out. So in the end, I had to put my own take on it, and the other one was not much easier either. So I think these things are pretty hard, but they test you.
Yeah.
You've got to pull something off. You can't oh well, that'll do. You can't say that. I never say that. Oh, that'll do. I mean, I get as far as I can with something and think, oh well, I can't do any better than that. That's a better way of looking at it, really. And if you can't do any better, then that's what you have. But of course, you wouldn't see that. People wouldn't see that. They're looking at it and looking at it as a whole. Face was fairly easy. She had a lovely face, and in profile too. Now, when you've got profiles, that's another. People that have done portrait work know that portrait. If you've got a profile, particularly over the nose and the chin, you've got to get that absolutely perfect. If you don't, it looks awful. So I had to be very, very careful. And when you're putting the dark colour against the light colour, which you are there, the white and the grey against the very dark grey and the black, you've got to be even more careful. But again, it's testing, and the effect is stunning. I love the effect of that.
Yeah, the light source being sort of quite strong from one angle has meant that there's a lot of subtlety in your light. You know, in terms of there's so many different areas to consider and think about and graduate. You know, the neck especially is what I'm drawn to, sort of the neck, and how you've got just a little bit of light there and it's darker. The right arm, which is further back, you know, you look at the back part of the arm and then the forearm, and there's so much subtlety there. You know, does that take a lot of thought? Have you got to kind of break it down section by section? You know, when you look at the picture and you think, right, the light on this part of the arm is this.
That's exactly right. There's a couple of points there. The hair that you can see quite clearly on the picture now, that was obscure. I couldn't see where it ended and where it began. So I had to make that little bit up. All I did was make the background just a tiny bit lighter so that I could profile the hair and where it fell. It didn't fall there, it fell lower down than that. But the problem there is if you have the hair lower down, it would have interfered with the elbow, and that would have looked awful. So again, a little bit of adjustment, and you have to think about it. Well, one of the very interesting things that I found, you know, the crook of the elbow, where on the right arm, where it meets the dress light that's hitting the dress, that in the upper arm it was, on the inside of the upper arm, where it meets the light folds of the dress. That wasn't obvious. When I looked at the picture, the reference picture, and I do show that on the video, you can't see it. You can't see where the dress ends and the arm begins. It's because of the lighting, really. It wasn't as clear as it is on my picture. And I went ahead with that, doing it as I saw it, because, my maxim, if you can't understand it, you do what you see. Didn't work here, because to do what I saw didn't look right. I thought, somehow or other, she's too fat. Her upper body would have been too heavy, too fat. So I had to use that little bit of darkness between the two and emphasise that. Are you with me? Can you see what I mean? That tiny bit there. It's only a small thing, but by golly, it enough show up. When you look at the picture now, you can see it very clearly. And then it highlighted that particular section of the back.
Interesting. Really interesting. It goes to show just how much when you get a picture like this, you have to use your own artistic license and change things a little bit. You know?
Absolutely. And you do that within the framework. You don't spoil the picture by doing it, obviously, but you would spoil it if you didn't do it. So it's the catch-22 situation. But this is what I like about it. This is why I'm so enthralled when I do a picture like this, and people see that. I just love it, and I now deliberately choose pictures which are challenging because of that reason. But it's a lovely picture. I think people will love this. It's one of my favourites without doubt, and I've done a lot of them now, but this is one of my favourites. The pose and the inspirational side of that light. The light that's coming from the top left-hand side there. That wasn't there. That was just plain black. And I thought, no, what's she reaching for?
Yeah.
She's got to be reaching for something, or is she just posing, you see? Well, that would have been a bit naff, just that pose. I thought, no, she's reaching for the light. So I deliberately put that light in. That's not easy to do either. You've got to fade that so that it's not too bright, just bright enough, and fades into the dark. But once again, it's nice. And the other thing is, it was pretty close to the top of the fingers there. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had to be careful that I didn't. If that light had strayed into the fingers, would have looked awful. So small things like this, I think, are fascinating, and I'm sure people will find that so.
Talking of just small little things there, details, and you mentioned light over dark before. Look how bright your signature is against that dark background.
Yes, I didn't have any choice really. That was the light grey. I think I'd used light grey there, or did I? I can't remember. But I didn't have any choice. When you look at a picture like that, there's only one place it will go.
Yeah, no, it goes to show, doesn't it? Just that you can on pastel mat. That's what you can do. You can pop that light over dark.
No problem at all. No problem at all. And that's black. That was black there as well.
Yeah. Excellent, fantastic. Oh well, yeah, it's a great picture. I hope everyone is looking forward to doing this one. Great job on it, Dad. And we'll check in with your next picture perhaps next week, and we can discuss that one.
Oh, I'm certain it will be there. I've done a third of it, but the third I've done is the most important bit. So, but people will see it. Very interesting. Once again, I do vary this slightly because I show people when I start off how I trimmed that picture down to where it is now, what I left off, and where well, I won't spoil it. If I go on, I might give it away. I don't want to do that. But I did that deliberately because I think people are interested. They're interested in seeing, how they can actually move in closer sometimes or change something minor to bring the subject more in focus and make it more lively. I think you've always got to remember when you're doing something like that, in a cat, dog, elephant, whatever, unless you're putting it in a complete setting, you've got to be mindful that that animal or that subject is the focal point. That's the important thing. Everything else you do is window dressing and has supportive. Got to be supportive. Got to make sense. So, but that's the important thing.
Great. Excellent stuff. Excellent. We'll look forward to seeing that next week. And in the meantime, if anyone has any other questions, anything they want us to talk about, then please let us know, comment on this video, send us an email, get in touch with us, and we will chat to you all next week. So thank you everyone for watching and for listening. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Enjoy your week.